Okay, now I'm going to introduce our panel discussion for you this afternoon. With a show of hands, how many of you have been using a large language model at work in the last 6 months? Awesome. How about in your personal life? Maybe using Claude, ChatGPT, all of those things? Cool. Over the last 2 years, we have seen an explosion in large language models. And in my role as an account manager at AWS, every week I'm having a discussion with my customers about different large language models, different use cases, and large language model selection. And there's a range of different considerations when picking next generation large language models. This afternoon, led by Lorna Brady, who leads our small to medium business sales teams across the UK and Ireland, she's going to lead a panel discussion where we're going to dive deep into a discussion around next gen LLMs, which will include AWS, Hugging Face, and an AWS customer. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome for Lorna Brady and our panel discussion this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here today, and more importantly, delighted to be alongside a very esteemed panel who I'm sure can enlighten us with their insight and knowledge in this really thought-provoking topic. So we might just kick off with some introductions first. So as Joe mentioned, Lorna Brady, commercial leader for our small and mid-sized segment across Ireland. Over to yourself, Scott, if you could share your company title and a bit about what you do in this space, and to the rest of the panel then.
My name's Scott Rosecrans. I'm our VP of Generative AI Business Development for AWS. I've been at AWS about 7 years, and my job is I'm about 85% customer facing. So I fly around the world and talk to our customers about what they're doing in AI.
My name is Guillaume Salou, and I'm in charge of infrastructure at Hugging Face. And I'm also taking care about our training cluster, which is training new models that we'll discuss a little bit later.
Hi, I'm Aidan McGarren, Senior Director of Architecture at WorkHuman. For those with the AWS customer mentioned, so those of you who don't know who WorkHuman are, we are an Irish tech unicorn. We've been around for about 25 years. We provide employee recognition software to some of the biggest companies across the world, servicing over 7 million users, helping them to recognize and reward each other for the work that they do. And our mission is to make work human. So that kind of puts a very interesting spin around how we kind of utilize AI within our organization and for our customers. So excited to share our journey today.
Super. So let's get started. I guess just to frame this evolving landscape, there's no doubt that LLM technology is evolving at a rapid clip. If we think about the Chinese AI startup, DeepSeek, they released their R1 LLM only about a month ago, and it really sent the industry into a complete tailspin because it was released at a fraction of the cost. And it's requiring industry players like AWS to iterate and to evolve. I think only 2 days ago, Matt Garman announced that it's now available as a fully managed model via Amazon Bedrock. So even for AWS, it's exciting. It means we also have to pivot as the industry evolves as well. So Guillaume, I'm going to come to you first. Given your experience in Hugging Face, what are you seeing around the industry over the last number of years, and especially up to more recent times?
Yeah, I would like to go a little bit in the past in order to explain what's happening, because it's important to happen what happened in 2017. In 2017, Google, they created a new architecture, and they call it attention is all you need. And it was the beginning of a new era for AI, because thanks to transformers, you were able to get one model and to do a new specific model with fine tuning. In the past, you had to retrain a model from scratch, and it was a lot of cost, a lot of knowledge. It was super complicated. And now it started from this and with a new model which is called BERT. So at the beginning we saw and we were what should we do? So we started to work on transformers library in order to ease for the community to use transformers model. But that wasn't enough. So we started to work on the hub, huggingface.co, in order to host models, in order to help communities to build new models, to fine-tune them, and to host them. So with this new capabilities, we saw the community, new companies starting to create new models. And at the beginning, we saw a lot of open source companies, But as it was moving forward, we noticed that some companies was doing more and more like closed source model. And the gap between like open source and closed model was getting more and more bigger. So we were like, okay, how we can help like more the community, more like the companies that want to do more open source. And we noticed that this gap, as you said, is definitely like in the other way. So thanks to DeepSeek and what like other companies like Meta with their open source, we now have like better like open source model than closed source model.
Great. Scott, I'm going to come to you on the same question. Obviously, in your role, you're customer-facing a lot of the time now as well. What are you seeing in the industry, especially in your engagements with ecosystem players in recent times?
Yeah, I think that, as you can tell, I'm not a young man, and I've been through a lot. I started working in the mainframe era, so I've seen mainframe to client server to internet to cloud, now AI, and we've never seen speed of innovation like this in 30 years, right? And so what was true 2 years ago is not true today, and that's not normal, right, in this industry. And so what we're seeing is customers, are not, back in the 90s, everyone went all in on Oracle database, right? And then, everyone went all in on VMware. But what we're seeing right now is people are like a little bit, I don't know about they're confused, but they're not sure which way to go because things are changing so much, and right. And so when this all started in 2023, OpenAI was pretty much the only game in town. And and then Anthropic came out, and Anthropic was, better, faster, cheaper. And then, OpenAI came out their model, and they were better, faster, cheaper. And just this week, Sonnet 3.7 came out, and it's probably the best coding, model that's on the market right now, right? And so the biggest thing I'm seeing is people trying to figure out how to be, flexible and not lock themselves in. And then secondly, over the past 2 years, large enterprises are opening their minds a little bit more to open source, right? And so a year and a half ago, people were already worried about AI and hallucinations and IP, but we're starting to see a lot more adoption of open source as we move along, and I think we're going to continue to see that. And then the third is just there's new models coming out every week, right? And it's moved from these big, large language models to specialty models, right? So we're seeing industry-specific models. We're seeing functional-specific models. We just launched a partnership with a company called Moon Valley that took a completely different model. It's all for the video industry, right? And they licensed all the IP, so nobody has to worry about IP infringement, and they're going to sell it all to movie studios. Very, very specific model, but solves a very, very specific purpose. So we're going to continue to see these things evolve over time.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think that shift from general purpose to domain specific is really starting to play out, and it's certainly a key thing we believe at AWS as well, around choice and the right tool for the right job. Aidan, I'm going to come to you because you bring a really valuable experience and insight into the panel today. You're a real-world customer that is deploying this technology in earnest. So can you share a bit about WorkHuman's experience in this space, your experience and the journey you've been on?
Yeah, we've been working with generative AI for over 5 years now. So we were early adopters of BERT and the still BERT, big Hugging Face fans. But like most companies, when 2023 came along and we had kind of ChatGPT and the availability of APIs to have these closed source models, it really changed. It was a step function difference in what we could achieve. And we kind of looked to try and kind of incorporate it into our product as soon as we possibly could. And one of the first things that we looked to do was to be able to deliver a product to help people, write rewards to each other. So, if you have to give a message thanking somebody for the work they do, sometimes it's a little bit difficult, and so you don't know how to get started. So we had this tool called Writer's Block that would draft the message for you. Seems low-hanging fruit, good idea, and so at the time, we trialed it internally, and it wasn't really a success. It didn't really kind of, get the traction that we intended. So you might kind of chalk that off as a failure, as a POC, and so, but we didn't see it that way because it allowed us just to rethink, and so how we wanted to leverage these models. We realized that, our mission, I didn't realize, we know our mission is to, make work more human. And what we were actually doing is we're replacing kind of authentic moments of recognition from people with a something drafted by a machine. So you're making work less human. Doesn't seem like a good idea upon reflection. So with all the kind of the new functionality and new capabilities that these models were giving us, we were able to just rethink our whole strategy around how we introduced it into the organization. We realized that when you're thanking somebody, and so there's a lot of rich data in that, it's very impactful, it's authentic, it's probably some vulnerability in there, asking for, thanking people for help. And it also kind of gives you a good indication, or if you look at this across the whole organization around the work that's being done, kind of what skills or behaviors are successful to how an organization operates and how it achieves its goals. So we realized that kind of had real human intelligence, and that was something that kind of really resonated with us. And we thought, okay, how about we actually kind of just rethink our whole product strategy and transform our platform and leverage these AI models to help people kind of write impactful messages to each other, and so it's authentic, it hits home, and so it has the meaning that they intended, and then amplify that across the whole organization. So those kind of good behaviors and those kind of cultural values, and so are seen across the whole organization and recognized. And then we decided to build an AI assistant, so people leaders could then query that information and find out who in my organization and so has good skills, can help me out with this project, what kind of performance trends are we seeing, what cultural trends are we seeing. So it was this kind of wonderful flywheel that we could build with AI, where it's kind of as reinforcement learning for fine-tuning your organization to kind of optimize it to better manage your talents and to improve performance to achieve your goals. And that wasn't available to us beforehand. So this was something that we had really bought into the vision, but then we had to go off and build it. And that was an interesting journey.
Great, and I think it's certainly our mandate in AWS is around failure as well, and celebrating those failures and what comes out of it. So I think that's a great example. And for customers out there as well, building those proof of concepts. They may fail, but also you'll get a lot of valuable learnings from it. Guillaume, just to bring you as well in here around the open source context, what are you seeing with enterprise deployments in the real world with open source?
Yeah, that's a point that we are working a lot, because when we saw how the open source model, they are very transparent. You can audit the model. You have it. I mean, you can download it. You can test it. You can improve it. You can change it. And it was the beginning of some kind of a path that we took with a hub in order to kind of secure the ways that you are downloading the model, but the way we are doing some audits on the model. We wanted to have scanners in order to scan a specific model, in order to ensure that there's no malware, there's no issue with security. Even if it's transparent, we need to help customer and enterprise to be sure that it's safe enough to use it. So that was the first point, but the second point was more related to reversibility. When it comes to an API or a company or whatever, and you're logged in because you're using it, and if anything is happening, the company can disappear, the price can increase a lot. So with the reversibility of an open source model and also different version, you're good. I mean, you won't have any issue in the future. So it's still good regarding the reversibility and the security as well.
Thank you. Scott, we know that often the reasons projects can fail, even in the world of cloud migrations, isn't often the technology, but it's people and culture. What are the considerations that you are talking to customers around when they're going to deploy this technology in their organization?
Yeah, I think a year and a half ago, every CEO was pushing their teams, going, "Hey, we're behind. We got to do Gen AI, right?" And so everyone did proof of concepts, and they rolled out projects, and it was a very small percentage actually went into production. And those that did had an adoption problem. And so everyone had to take a step back and look at, hey, first of all these use cases we're building, is there actually value to it? Is it either going to reduce our costs or is it going to increase our revenue? And Gen AI is one of the few technologies that should be able to do both, right? And so are we picking projects that are going to have an impact one way or another? The second is hey, we don't need to roll it out a big bang thing. And if you look at how, hopefully you all shop on Amazon.com, and if you do, there's this thing called Rufus. which is it's an online shopping assistant that you can use natural language to actually shop for what you're looking for, right? And so I'm a cyclist, and so if I wanted to maybe go get a new helmet, before I would type in helmet, and I'd get a list of 25 things, and then I'd have to figure it out. Now I can say, hey, give me a white helmet for road cycling and this type of strap or whatever. And it'll bring me back answers, and then it will actually summarize all the reviews around it. So you can easily make better choices. And so we found two things by doing that. Number one was that our conversion rate was higher. And number two, that our returns were less because people were actually getting the product they wanted. But we didn't roll it out big bang, right? We rolled it out over the course of a year. And first it was like, available to 1% of shoppers, then 5% of shoppers. So we kind of trickled it out so we could improve it along the way and take feedback, right? And so, when we talk to customers about what they should do, a lot of it is, you have to have some change management in place. You have to roll it out slowly, and you don't need to wait for the big, massive win. Little incremental drip wins are okay. And even we rolled out Q internally at AWS, and we didn't tell anybody. We just put it on the website. And someone on my team said to me one day, like, "Oh, hey, that's pretty good. How'd you do that?" And she's, "Oh yeah, we use Cedric, which is our internal implementation of Q." I'm like, "What's Cedric?" Like, so we just put it out there, and we didn't tell people, and then we were wondering why people weren't using it, right? And so you have to have a campaign behind it about what you're doing it, what people can do with it, and then, relative to WorkHuman, then you go and you recognize and you prop up the people that are adopters internally and are the ones that are doing it, and you create this recognition environment, and then suddenly people get FOMO and say, well, I want to be the one that's being recognized for all the great work I'm doing in generative AI. And then I have enough time for one more example. So one of the things that we're doing in AWS right now is the other part of rolling out Gen AI is a little bit top-down. And we will grow the business roughly 27% in 2025. And we will do that with 0 additional headcount. And so the only way that that's going to happen is we run our business better with generative AI. And that's kind of Matt's way of forcing AWS to be more efficient, right? We used to say, you're going to grow 27%. Well, here's, 5,000 more people to do it. This year it's go figure out how to do it with generative AI. So whether that's going to be coding for our service teams, content creation for our marketing teams, better forecasting for the sales team. So we all now have to go figure out how do we run our businesses and meet all of our metrics with less people and a high growth number. So there's multiple different ways to approach it to drive adoption.
Yeah, super. Thanks so much. Aidan, just on one of those points that Scott touched on, I'll bring you back in around adoption and the people, I guess the people side of the house. So how did you guys address that in terms of the skills potentially and driving that adoption internally?
Yeah, well, a couple of kind of challenges with skills when we kicked this off, and we had the skills that we needed to build the product, and we had the skills that we needed to be able to roll out AI for adoption across the whole organization. And it was a really interesting time to start building an AI product and an AI team, because at the time there's all these new titles being created, and so there was a prompt engineer, and so where there were salaries being touted of 350K, and so for a prompt engineer for a role that didn't exist 2 months ago, and you're going to the market to try and find a talent pool for a role that didn't exist. So there's a lot of quick realization that we're going to have to train and develop our resources so they can actually kind of start to build up, and it's a teachable skill. So we had to invest a lot of time and effort in training, and we had some concerns around what would be people's perception to this kind of, maybe they might see it as an aggressive push with AI, but something that we felt that was really important that we had to do. And we surveyed the whole organization, and we actually kind of, those fears were unfounded. There was kind of a huge appetite for people to leverage AI, but they just didn't have the training or the tooling. So we had to quickly invest in tooling. So we rolled out, kind of coding systems across all our developers. We rolled out kind of Copilot toolings, and so across all of our organization. And like you said, kind of earlier on, Scott, and so you have to kind of just continue and invest in that. It's a kind of constant campaign. You have to sustain it because every month something changes within that. So you have to kind of make sure that people are up to speed with all that change. And we're kind of reaping the rewards of it now. And so we have people who hadn't touched kind of AI, and so years beforehand, delivering code into production last week. And so models such as the Stillbert still going into production, and then we're leveraging Claude 3.7. So yeah, it took a long time. It was worthwhile investment. But that's something we had to kind of really kind of spend time doing. We also had to lean on some of our partners as well, and that's kind of critically important, right? And when we first started off in this journey, we kind of reached out to a lot of kind of our partners around staff augmentation, see if they had the skills, and they were kind of the same boat as we were. They were still building their bench, and we were kind of talking to them, and we're like, actually, you know what? We know more about AI than they do, even though we're probably only about 3 months ahead in our journey than they were. What we found is actually kind of talking to other companies who are in the same position, or maybe just 3 months ahead of us, so we could learn from them. And actually kind of this event last year, I think it was a kind of really useful event because we networked, we talked to kind of people in Trellix to see what they were doing, and we learned from that, and we took that back, and we used that information to help educate our people.
Great. So it sounds like it really is a multifaceted approach, especially when it comes to people, be it L&D, augmenting through partners, understanding what's happening in the community, and continuously evolving that piece. Great. Guillaume, I'm going to come to you around, I guess, the tricky word of cost. So I spoke to a customer even today, and they said, I just don't even know how much of this is going to cost me, and how do I build an ROI on it? Could you talk about some of those cost considerations organizations need to think about when they're building that robust ROI?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the points is like the accelerators. They are expensive because they are getting more and more bigger, more and more faster, and they support more and more bigger models. So our position is more like to find like the right suitable model for your use case. Because in the end, if you want to have like a giant model, you will need like a lot of hundreds of GPUs, multiple instances that are working together. Like the cost is super high, and it's complicated to operate. So our vision is more like to have like specific models, maybe sometimes like quantized models, or like some specific accelerators that we are working with AWS, like Inferentia, in order to have like the best performance ratio regarding your needs, and not like to have like a giant model.
Right. And actually, I'll stick with you as well around those next-gen capabilities that you see emerging, or I guess we can't look into the crystal ball, but what do you think are some of those capabilities that will emerge? Yeah,
so what like everybody saw with DeepSeek R1, when we saw it, we were like, okay, this is super interesting, like for open source, this is such a great opportunity to show it to the world that we are like in the battle, we are ready to compete. So our like first like project was to reproduce DeepSeek R1, and people were like, why? We don't understand, like you want to do the same model, because we wanted to understand like behind the research paper, and that's kind of the goal of like Hugging Face, is to democratize AI and to help like companies, people, communities to use and to have like the best approach or the best techniques when it comes to use like model. So we were like working on OpenR1, which is like the new training of DeepSeek R1, but like in open source way. I mean, all the codes, all the data set, everything will be open sourced. So to help like company to do the same. And if you look at back what they did at DeepSeek, they took like what Meta did and they apply it again. So we see like, thanks to like the work of every company like yours, like giving to open source, giving their models, giving the techniques, it's getting better and better, and the models are better too. So when we were like working on this model, we saw like the opportunity to open source a model, a new model, which is called Olympic Coder, and we released it yesterday, so it's kind of new. And it was just beating like Claude 3.7 on the coding. And even if it's a small model, we have a 7 billion parameter model, which is kind of small, and it's beating Claude 3.7. So it's kind of super exciting for us, because it's not just like one technology. It's like about like all the work that is done by the community, and to help like them to get like the better like options for the future.
Brilliant, and congrats on the launch. Scott, from an industry perspective, what are you seeing with customers, and I guess what surprised you the most?
Yeah, I think the thing that has been the most surprising to us is that regulated industries have been the earliest adopters of Gen AI. Apologize to the people who heard me say that this morning, but you know, normally in the technology cycle, financial services, healthcare and pharma, they're late because they're worried about the regulators. They were early this time, and even more ironically, they're using generative AI to provide the data that the regulators want, right? And so they're actually, you know, let's take, for example, the drug discovery business, right? And so the pharma companies have been able to save a ton of money on clinical trials, the data gathering, all the different things they have to do to report to the FDA to move their drugs along in the development cycle. And so they're actually bringing the regulators along with them, having all the data at their fingertips that they want, that is created by generative AI, which is speeding up the process of them doing drug development, but at the same time also making the regulators more comfortable with this as a technology. So the tables have turned a little bit. The ones I would have expected were going to go faster are going slower, and the ones that we would expect to go slower have actually been going faster.
Super interesting. Aidan, I want to get into real-world implementation and deployment. I guess there could be people in the audience today who don't know how to get started, or they have a POC in mind, but they don't know where to take it. What advice would you give to them if they want to get started?
Well, first of all, do get started as soon as you possibly can. There's never been a better time to do it, right? We started about 1.5 years ago, and a lot of technology was emerging, it wasn't very mature. It's much more mature now. And I think you mentioned earlier on about costs for the ROI and then the open source models. You know, that's great because they are actually kind of helping drive down costs further. So a year ago, some of the OpenAI models for GPT-4, you know, that was about 400 times more expensive than it is now. So it's constantly being driven down. DeepSeek is going to drive costs down further. So you don't necessarily have to go off and build your own model. You don't have to start kind of hosting your own models. You can do some really kind of quick POCs leveraging open source or closed source technologies, whatever is the fastest way for you to be able to do your POC. And that starting small is incredibly important because you're going to make some mistakes. All the biggest tech companies in the world have made some mistakes and some missteps or have had delays. So you're going to encounter those. So start small, iterate fast, kind of celebrate your failures but if they're small, you're able to pivot pretty quickly. I think another what is critically important is to bring your employees along with you on the journey, right? That's kind of you're going to have to upskill all your engineering teams. You have to upskill all kind of users of AI across your organization, and you're going to have to listen to them. What's critical is user feedback. You're going to do a POC in what is a very challenging and new nascent area, and that's why people struggle to understand the ROI, because it's a whole new way of interacting with technology. We don't know how people are going to interact with it or how they're going to perceive the value. So having that kind of tight user feedback loop with both your customers and with your kind of internal users will make sure that they feel listened to, and make sure that they kind of they're giving you the guidance to kind of point you in the right direction. I think kind of lastly, we are work human, and Scott said it as well. You have to kind of thank and celebrate and recognize the people who are on that journey with you, because that will motivate them, because failure's hard, right? And so we've had data science teams, who've had 5 years of work, kind of made obsolete, by a single prompt sentence, right? So you're going to have to kind of make sure that you bring them along with you, and then that recognition is going to be critically important to make sure that people have that resiliency, and they kind of have that motivation to keep moving forward, get through those failures, and they will deliver you this success.
Is there anything when you think back that you would do differently?
Many things.
Yeah.
when I look back. So we kind of mentioned kind of the failure, the POC. It was the best failure we've ever had. I think kind of one of the things that we did is that we started too big. That's why I kind of said start small.
Yeah.
We looked to fine tune and train a kind of Mistral 7B. And then, we encountered all the issues that people told you would encounter around hallucinations, data leakage, and it's costly and it's time consuming, and it was kind of, it was something that we're really interested in, we want to continue to explore, but it shouldn't have been on our critical path, right? So we just tightened the loop there a little bit, and then, kind of went back to kind of starting small, iterating fast, and getting feedback.
Great. And to the rest of the panel, as we get close to the end, is there anything else that you would like to impart to the audience around getting started on that journey? Scott?
I mean, Aiden kind of stole my thunder there. But, yeah, look, the only thing I say, like, you got to move fast and you got to be okay failing. And the only thing that I would add to what Aiden was saying is, at least the way that I see a lot of customers doing it is their initial use cases involve still some sort of human-in-the-loop decision-making, right? And so if a wealth management company is using generative AI to provide all the market research on making recommendations on certain financial equities, there's still that broker at the end of the day that's going to say, yeah, I agree with that before doing the transaction. So, ease your way into these use cases and don't go full AI automation until everyone's comfortable with it.
Nice. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I agree. And to represent like a little bit what will be AI in the future, in my opinion, it will be like internet, like everywhere. And you should have it into your strategy. And you shouldn't be locked with like one like specific company or like technology. You should be like open and looking at what's happening currently and to be ready and to continue to move forward, because it won't stop and your competitors are already working on it. It's very important.
Yeah, great. I couldn't agree more. So look, thank you everyone for today. I think there's no doubt that organizations of all shapes and sizes are starting to leverage large language models and foundation models to build Gen AI applications, whether it's enhancing customer experience, boosting productivity, building new business insights, and driving innovation across the organization. There's a huge amount of benefit, but getting started is key. So as a shameless plug to all customers in the room, please talk to your account team. That's what we are here to do, to help our customers on this journey. So thank you very much to my panel for today. I really appreciated their time and effort. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for the panel.